Ministry of National Security sent the chiefs of our defense forces to tell us to vote yes. And so I want to look at what the state of our defense is and put that in context in relation to this matter. And then we look at 2019. What are some of the possible outcomes from your participation in that referendum? And I'll take questions. But of course, I'll take questions whenever you're ready. But if not, then we'll do it at the end. Okay, the concept of sovereignty, this is extremely important. You often hear people talk about, we are a sovereign nation, we are a sovereign state, you're in violation of our sovereignty, and so on. Sovereignty is an internationally accepted concept that in Belize, in the United States, within any state, there is a supreme authority, and nobody, nowhere else on earth can tell that supreme authority what to do. In essence, that is sovereignty. You are a sovereign person, I am a sovereign person. You can't tell me what to do and I can't tell you what to do. Now we can influence each other, of course, but ultimately the decision to act in a part as such, nobody should be able to tell us what to do. Now, sovereignty connotes internal decision making. For example, in Belize, the sovereign authority is the House of Representatives, both the upper house and the lower house. That is the sovereign authority of Belize. When they make decisions, whether we like it or not, that decision binds us. So if the government makes a law, we don't have to agree with it, but we have to obey it, correct? Because they have exercised sovereign authority. Similarly, if the Senate ratifies a convention, we don't have to agree with it, but that convention binds us. So the House of Representatives, by our Constitution, establishes the sovereign authority of Belize. But sovereignty also has implications for statecraft. Statecraft really is foreign relations. It is the interaction of sovereign nation states. And a basic principle of statecraft is that we're all sovereign equals. So the United States and Belize are sovereign equals. We both get one vote at the United Nations. Now the United States is a larger, more powerful country than Belize. We will all agree with that, right? So they are able to influence us. But conceptually, we are equals, sovereign equals. And whenever you find that your country begins to act anything other than as a sovereign equal, you're in trouble. And I think from my perspective, Belize has not been acting as a sovereign equal when it comes to Guatemala. Some time ago, the foreign minister mentioned that we really don't have friends. What we have are nation states that have interests. So we have interests as a nation. The United States have their own interests. The United Kingdom have their own interests. And you can't fault them for advancing their own interests. The people who should be looking after our interests are our representatives. The government, our ambassadors, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. They are the ones who owe us a duty to look after our interests. But when our interest aligns with those of our friends, quote unquote, then they pat us on the back, tell us what a wonderful nation we are. When our interests diverge, that's when we get in trouble. They start to quarrel with you, and give you no aid. They undermine you here, they undermine you there because your interests diverge. So this is always about a game of interest. And so as you look at the ICJ referendum, I ask you to look at that and ask the question, in whose interest is this ICJ issue about? Is it about the interest of Belize? Is it about the interest of Guatemala? Or is it about the interest of the United States and the United Kingdom? Now, sovereignty is a fiercely guarded right of nation states. And you look across the world, when you look at the news, you see countries always talking about their defending their sovereignty. In August of this year, the Canadian ambassador tweeted that they were very annoyed that the Saudis had arrested 2 so-called dissidents and jailed them. And they called for the immediate release of these human rights activists. A tweet, you know. Immediately, the Saudis responded. They charge the Canadians with an attempt to interfere into the sovereign affairs of Saudi Arabia. They recall their ambassador for consultation. They summoned the Canadian High Commissioner, gave him 24 hours notice to leave the country, declared him a persona non grata. Withdrew all the Canadian health workers, the Saudi health workers that are in Canada and who are critical to the Canadian health system, recalled all of them and threatened to stop shipping oil to Canada. Because the Canadian foreign minister said, "How dare you arrest those people, release them immediately." A tweet. This is how fiercely other nations defend their sovereignty. Meanwhile in Belize, the Guatemalans cross over the Star Strait with their military, and we treat it as though it is no big deal. Let me tell you this, my fellow Belizeans. He who yields in the name of peace will soon have nothing to yield. You know, say, oh, give and give and give till there's nothing else to give. This is what we're doing as a sovereign nation. We are afraid of Guatemala, and so we yield. We give, we give, we give, we give. At what point do we say, enough is enough? So as I mentioned before, the sovereign authority is vested in the Constitution, and as you know, we have three branches of government. The House, the Senate, and the judiciary. Those are the sovereign powers of Belize. We as people have given that power unto them through the Constitution. Now you have sovereignty de jure and you have sovereignty de facto. Sovereignty de jure is your right to exercise sovereignty over a particular area. In our case, our sovereignty de jure is 8,867 square miles. Whatever the sovereign authority of Belize does within that 8,867 square miles, nobody can question, because we have the right of sovereignty over that. But there is what we call sovereignty de facto, sovereignty in practice. How are we exercising that sovereignty? Well, unfortunately, we are exercising sovereignty only over 8,589 square miles. We have done this because we want to appease the Guatemalans. If you look at the adjacency zone, which was a big diplomatic mistake as far as I'm concerned, we have given up 82 square miles, even though it's still a part of our right to exercise sovereignty over it. We don't behave as if that area is ours. So for example, before the BDF can go into the adjacency zone, they must first tell the Guatemalans. So the BDF will transmit to Guatemala and say, we will go into the adjacency zone next Tuesday, we will take 14 soldiers and we will enter at this point and we'll come out at that point. Now, does that sound like a nation that's sovereign and exercising sovereignty over its territory? No. It's absolute nonsense. Then we have the Chiquibul and the Columbia Forest Reserve. That's another 196 square miles lost. The Guatemalans have come over. They are stealing our land, with wildlife, with gold. They are polluting our waters. 40% of the fresh water of Belize comes from the Chiquibul. And this is what we have effectively given up. On paper, it's still ours, but we're not exercising sovereignty over it. So we don't deploy the BDF in full force to prevent that invasion. Instead, we withdraw the BDF and allow the Guatemalans to have free reign. And the argument is, we don't want to get an integrity. But you can never violate territorial integrity without, at the same time, violating sovereignty. Let me give you a very simple example. If the GSU was to barge into the US Embassy, that would be a violation of the sovereignty of the United States. Because the embassy in Belmopan is considered to be the sovereign territory of the United States. But clearly it's in Belize. If the GSU goes in there as an arm and branch of the government of Belize, that would be a violation of the sovereignty of the United States. But if the GSU was to go to Mexico and cross the American border, that's territorial violation, you see? So you can violate sovereignty without going into the territory of a country, but you can't do it the other way around. And so this is very important to understand, because every time the Guatemalans cross into Belize, it is a violation of our territorial integrity and a violation of our sovereignty. And they ought to be protested viciously and fiercely by the government. And we somehow are not doing that at all. Okay, now, your sovereign nation, so how do you maintain your sovereignty? I often tell people that there is nothing that says that there has to be a nation state called Belize, you know. There's nothing that says Belize has to exist. Belize can be absorbed by Guatemala, Belize can be absorbed by Mexico, Belize can be conquered by the United States. There's nothing that says there has to be a nation state called Belize. So it is for us as Belizeans to defend Belize and ensure that Belize remains a nation state. That is, of course, if that is what we want. I'm sure some people would happily go and become a territory of the United States because we think that would be better for us. Some of us would say, no, we'd rather be our own country. But if you're your own country, then you have a duty to defend that sovereignty. All right? Now, to defend that sovereignty, there are things we call elements of national power. These are the things that determine your strength relative to other states. Right? And those are diplomatic, informational, military, economic, and technological. Technology was just added over the last 5 years, and clearly we understand why. Everything is now driven by technology. But if you look at where we are in terms of those elements of national power, and we compare them to Guatemala, there is really no comparison. Guatemala clearly has outdone us diplomatically. When you look at what our foreparents did leading up to our independence, superb diplomatic work. After we became independent, we mashed the brakes. Our embassies and consuls and so on became paid vacation places for our political cronies. No diplomatic work. This is a constant effort that is needed if you are a sovereign state, particularly a small one that has a larger neighbor that claims you. Diplomacy becomes even more important to a country such as Belize. Informational. When you talk about, if I were to tell you about the LGBT community, if I were to tell you about human rights, and the answer that you give me, I'm almost 90% sure it reflects an American perspective. Why do you think that is? CNN, NBC, ABC, information, it controls the mind. Al Jazeera, for example, which is a new news channel, comes out of the Middle East. They have a different perspective. RT, I don't know how many of you look at that. That's from the Russian perspective. They give you the Russian worldview. But the control of information is extremely important. When there is an incident along our border, the first people to the news are the Guatemalans. And they tell their side of the story. And of course, you know what that side is, right? The BDF, nothing but barbarians. They butcher some police boy, the chicken bull. We are being warlike. We're not good neighbors. And then we have to try and play catch up. Information is extremely important. Militarily, Guatemala have the numbers, clearly, a larger population. They're able to raise more manpower. But the size of the military is not necessarily what determines the outcome, military outcome. It's effectiveness, how well you're trained, how well you're equipped, and how fierce you are. I see often on Facebook that people say they would rather have 100 sheep led by a wolf or a lion rather than the other way around. When you have fierce leaders, people respect you. And that's how the military game is played. It is not necessarily numbers. It's how effective that military is. And I'll talk a little bit about the BDF a little further on. And then economic. This is always an important one, because usually when there are troubles between nations, they start with the diplomacy side, they go with misinformation and economic. Sanctions, we're familiar with sanctions, right? When the Americans get vexed with you, they apply sanctions. And sometimes the sanctions are not, it could be as simple as the US Embassy putting out an alert. Belize City rough. So be careful, Americans. So what happened? It impacts on tourism. Correct? That's economic warfare. And because we've come to rely so much on tourism and visiting Americans, one simple alert from the US Embassy can disrupt your economic activity. And then technological, these days people can shut down your power stations, they impact your hospitals, BTL, and could jump BTL, and all the way and panic with BTL go up one day, but they miss their Facebook and Twitter and WhatsApp and so on, right? Next, please. All right, so let me touch briefly on the ICJ. We've been asked to submit the sovereignty of this country to the ICJ and for the ICJ to determine our borders. The ICJ is one of the 6 organs of the United Nations. The other 5 are the General Assembly, which is the highest body, the Security Council, which is the only body authorized to use force on behalf of the United Nations. You have the Secretariat, and most people, when they think of the UN, they think of the Secretariat, which is the UN building we see in New York, and where everybody goes, and presidents visit and make speeches and so on. That's where all the professionals of the UN have their offices. There is a trustee council that's now in abeyance because there is no more territory to lead into independence, and there is an economic and social council. So the ICJ is the court of the United Nations for all intents and purposes. To get to the ICJ, you can go by two paths, right? You can go the contentious route, which is reserved for states only. Only states can go with the contentious route. And then there is the advisory route that only organs of the United Nations can go, or specialized agencies such as UNDP, UNICEF, World Health Organization, etc. They can go to the ICJ and ask for an advisory opinion. If you and I as nation states have a problem, we will go the contentious route. Now, to go the contentious route, there are 3 ways in which you can do that. Because you're a sovereign state, you have to submit to the ICJ. So you will send a formal declaration from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that says, Belize submits to the compulsory jurisdiction of the court. Any other nation that does the same thing can then take you to court on any matter. All right? The other way is by treaty. If we enter into a treaty and the treaty says, if there is a problem with any of the parties to this treaty, it will be resolved at the ICJ. That's the second way. And then the third way is the way by which we are going, which is a special agreement, where Belize and Guatemala signed a compromise, setting out how it is that we will approach the ICJ, and then giving the ICJ the authority to make a decision on that question that is in the compromise. There are 15 judges, and when you get elected as a judge, it's for 9 years. And then every 3 years, there's elections for 5 judges, so that there is continuity on the bench. They don't all come in and go out at the same time. So every 3 years, 5 judges, another 3 years, 5 judges. The last election was last year, and those judges took office in February of this year. And the judges are elected by the General Assembly and the Security Council. Those elections are held simultaneously, so that the outcome of the General Assembly does not impact the outcome at the Security Council. Sounds familiar, right? That was the way we were supposed to have gone to the referendum, remember? Belize and Guatemala should have voted on the same day, so that the outcome in Guatemala does not impact the outcome in Belize. But they changed it up on us, right? And that was a deliberate decision on the part of our leaders to pressure us into saying yes, because everybody knew that Guatemala was going to say yes. So to put us on the spot, they asked and allowed Guatemala to go first. But here at the United Nations, to elect judges, it is done simultaneously. General Assembly votes, Security Council votes on the same day. And then the outcome, whoever wins, then assumes their position on the bench. The decisions of the contentious cases are binding, and where the parties don't comply, it is referred to the Security Council for action. So, even though the ICJ is a court of law, before it starts and after it's completed its work, it's all political. So, next year, we are being asked to make a political decision as a people. Should we go to the ICJ? If we say yes, the matter is converted into a legal issue, goes before the court. Once the court decides, it goes back into the political field. What are they doing so far? When, let's say the outcome is in favor of Belize and Guatemala still acts the fool. Then we have to go to the Security Council and say, look, Guatemala, they misbehaved. at the Security Council, if you've ever looked at how they behave, it's all politics. When the United States decided to support and move its embassy to Jerusalem, what did Guatemala do? T-toe behind, right? That's brown nosing we call it, right? But then they look after their interests, right? They are currying favors with the Americans. So when something goes to the Security Council and the rest of the Security Council says, yes, we agree, let's punish Guatemala for the behavior, what do you think the United States will do? It will veto, because the United States, as one of the permanent five, has veto powers over any decision at the Security Council. So when the ruling from the ICJ goes to the Security Council, it becomes all political. Forget the legal arguments, forget everything, it becomes politics. And geopolitics is what will determine the outcome there. One of the popular arguments for suggesting to the Belizean people that we should go to the ICJ has been not even the British could have gotten the Guatemalans to agree to go to the ICJ. And that somehow we should be so proud that we've scored this diplomatic coup. Absolute nonsense. The Guatemalans understand international politics. Belize versus Guatemala at the ICJ is not the same as Guatemala versus Britain at the ICJ. No. You understand why they have no problem with going with us? Because we're a small, powerless country. There's no way they would have agreed, and I don't blame the Guatemalans either. Why would you go to the ICJ when you understand how the ICJ works with a more powerful country? In fact, the other day, a couple of weeks ago, I believe, the Iranians took the Americans to the ICJ. And they did that by way of treaty. Remember I said if there is a clause in the treaty that says you can go to the ICJ for difficulties? Well, the Iranians took the Americans, and they won. And the ICJ said to the Americans, you have to stop the sanctions because it is contrary to your treaty obligations. You know what the Americans did, right? Gave the ICJ the finger and said, you know what? The ICJ is political and ineffective. Now these are the same people that tell we go to ICJ now. They simply said, to hell with you ICJ, we will continue with free sanctions against Iran. This is how this plays on the international stage. But they give us the impression that the court, the ICJ, is similar to our Supreme Court. It is not. Here the Supreme Court makes a decision and you better follow it, or Chester Williams and Colloquio. Out there, don't say work. You understand me? Right makes, might makes right out there. And so there should never be a time that we put our country in a position where somebody else makes sovereign decisions for us. And the last point I want to talk about, they're saying, let's go to the ICJ, and when we go to the ICJ, we'll get this Guatemalan monkey off the back. We can't develop because of this claim, and we really need to get this off and maybe focus on nation building. Well, look, the monkey does not for we know. The monkey of Britain, right? Look at what, next slide please, look at what the entire United Nations said in 1980. This is an excerpt from the resolution that gave us our independence in 1980. The United Nations says that they are convinced that the differences that exist between the United Kingdom and Guatemala, where did they say any problem between Belize and Guatemala? It is clear that this is an Anglo-Guatemalan dispute. The British, in connivance with the Americans, have been able to convert this now into a legal claim by Guatemala against Belize. Do you see what happened there? The British took this Guatemalan problem and put it on the backs of the Belizean people. And now, this is what they're asking us to do next year, is to honor that same trickery that the British did to us. So, the other side has been saying that if you say you will vote no, that somehow you are not informed. And then they send you back for education, more education. Read the facts, research. If you say no, you're uneducated and you're emotional. If you say yes, you are informed and educated. Well, I say no yesterday, I say no today. I know it happened tomorrow, right? No. They also say that the claim has stymied our development. right? Which is not true. In fact, I heard the British High Commissioner on Open Your Eyes, the British High Commissioner, saying that because of the Guatemalan claim, it has stymied Belize's development. Absolute nonsense. And then they encourage us to make legal arguments outside the courtroom. You hear about, I can't say some of the words, effective occupation, acquisitive prescription, something et bono. Look, we ask for average Belizean to try and understand this. If we in this room who are so educated have difficulties trying to sift through all the mischief, what do you think will happen to the average Belizean? That is where politics enters the fray. And then they give this next stupid argument. The Guatemalans, they agree that Belize don't belong to them. But they can't go to their own people and say, why we make a mistake, this thing really don't belong to me. Right? They can't do that. So they want Belize to go to court, knowing fully well that they will lose. Then they can turn to their people and say, see, we really want to claim, we mistake that for we, but the court said they're not for we. That's the argument me not divide. You understand me? Sleep with your own eye. Me not do nothing for the Guatemalans. In fact, how can they say they want an escape? When all this while they're teaching their children that Belize belongs to them. Even if the Guatemalans were to stop teaching their children that today, it will take at least a generation or two for that to flow, correct? So they are being disingenuous when they tell us such nonsense. And then we'll be abandoned by the international community. And this, this is the one that just and Angola and everybody began with. Next, please. I'll go. All right. Yes, equal, informed, and educated tells you that the education campaign is not really an education campaign. I sit on the Referendum Commission for the People's United Party. John Breseni knows that I am no, but he still put me on the commission. We try to bring some balance to the presentations made by the Referendum Commission, the $8 million that they have for this campaign. And they resisted and presented only one side. And their argument is, we will only present the facts and let the Belizean people make up their minds. But when you look at those presentations, they're all designed to lead you to one outcome, and that is yes. And so we have to applaud the DAC and her team for doing what we should all do. Here, Major Jones and foolishness with the no, he's uninformed and uneducated no, and then let the other side come in and tell us why we should go, and then you all make up your minds. But to give the people one side is most unfair, especially when you consider what this is really about. And people say it, but it's really true. It's the most important thing we will do as a nation since our independence. How we come out of this, we either come out with 8,867 or come out sharp. And I am not prepared to take that risk at all. Right? And then they also start to shame, right? That's why I tell you, so now people who are no, tend to get now the kind of cards and I want to look uneducated, nobody wants to be looked upon as a fool, right? So, oh, you have vote by him? I think I vote yes. He wants to know because they say, hey, that means you're not educated, go read some more, read a sad book. Right? Nobody, by the way. I suspect that they have said to the group of friends that we will get the Belizean people to vote yes. You know, I have studied, and I'm sure some of you have done it as well, in the United States and the United Kingdom. These people have a way of stroking your ego, you know. They come and tell you how smart you are, how wonderful you are, how different you are from the rest of the people that Belize, you know. And then when they don't know you, so don't speak you up, and Papa request by you. How can you say no when they don't speak you up? Right? And this is what they do to people. They go and tell us that how wonderful he is, how smart and brilliant he is, and that he might very well win the Nobel Peace Prize if he will solve this. Man, you see what they set up post today? Said, you really believe he will win a Nobel Peace Prize for this? No? So he is not seeing the risk and the dangers because they've said to him, you won't win, said the way to worry about, you won't get your Nobel Peace Prize, and there's nothing more a lion want than to put that in nice thing by place, you know? Right? So like I mentioned to you, the question is so complex that the average voter will not be able to decide on his or her own. And that is why now we saw the Prime Minister, I was shocked when I saw it, said the other day that the cabinet supports yes, but the UDP now supports yes. If I am a UDP voter, and I am a primary school person, And I can't read this question and analyze it. My party says, yes, we think on those. I say, yes, look, this is unfair, you know, right? This is unfair. The People's United Party has not yet taken a decision. I know they're in a bit of a pickle now because I can tell you from my own interactions with supporters is that, yeah, thank you. Some postal job. My bad. Too early. Even too early, no? Yeah, thank you. Yes. So now my understanding is that the base of the PUP don't want it either. So now Johnny don't mind because easiest if the PUP says no, we look like classic politics, right? Because UDP says, PUP says no. You see how they've muddied the waters for us? When this should not be about UDP or PUP, it should be about you as a voter being made extremely understandable about what is happening so that you can make your own decision, right? So I'm just so disappointed in all of it. We've mishandled it and we have get ourselves in trouble if we're not careful. This is why we have not developed the way we should. When you compare where we are with other nations, particularly given our natural resources and our human resources, this is why we have not developed poor political leadership. Right? We have kings and queens now in politics, right? We have failed to educate our people. In fact, you all know that better than I do, how many of our young people are slipping through the cracks, and we can't develop a nation on common sense. You know, I was getting a quarrel with people because now they start to look on people with degree with scorn. Degree at no temperature, that's the thing when they throw it away because that degree, right? And I always tell people, no nation on earth develops on common sense. None. Right? Common sense tell you that one plane that weighs 200,000 pounds should not fly, not true? But science make it fly. Right? One ship, you see a cruise ship, you see how big a cruise ship that make out a steel, you know. I with only 200 pounds can't stay afloat. Huh? I look by that thing when it float. Science, no common sense. Right? Common sense tells you that shouldn't float. So if we don't educate our people, clearly we can't develop along the pathway that we should, right? And here at the bottom we have just 3 examples of countries who have border disputes and it has not stymied their development. Singapore, everybody talk about how wonderful and developed Singapore is. They had a border dispute up until 2007. You never slowed down now. Uruguay and Brazil, you know the SecGen of the OAS is from Uruguay. They've had a border dispute with Brazil since 1861. You know, slow them down. So when they tell you that, let's get this over with so that we can develop, it's absolute nonsense. It's nonsense. And then the legal arguments outside the courtroom. Look, the facts are not going to change, the facts are the facts. But it is pointless to make legal arguments outside the courtroom. It's a waste of time. Because nothing matters outside the courtroom. What matters is what our lawyers do when they get to the ICJ. And look at how tight your case tight. If when the lawyer gets before the judge, he makes a mistake, you'll get off. How much time we don't sit on the news that the police find a man red-handed, they got a gun, they got up a camera, they got everywhere. And one mistake the prosecutor do, he forget to put in the evidence or call is they give the wrong serial number for the gun. And the next lawyer was, oh, Your Honor, he said 1, 2, 3, but the 6 go, the thing done. So the legal arguments outside the courtroom don't make no sense. And there has never been a case at the ICJ like this one. You know why? Because nations don't submit their sovereignty like that. The only other country I could think of that has a nation, a neighbor that claims so much of it is Guyana and Venezuela. Right? And Venezuela is claiming about 1/3 of Guyana. But countries don't do this. They're asking us to go to the ICJ and put up half of Belize for the judge to decide if it really belongs to us, when the world has already told us in 1981 that it does. And then the lawyers as foreign ministers, This is our problem right here. Lawyers see things black and white, legal, illegal. And they get excited when it comes to cases. Right? Mr. Barrow and Mr. Musa, 2 lawyers, have exercised influence and authority over all foreign affairs for 92% of the time that we have been independent. You think about that. These two men have touched foreign affairs either as foreign minister or as prime minister for 92% of the time since our independence. So if anybody is to blame for this precarious position in which we find ourselves, then I say two liars. And then we talked about this earlier, right? We have adopted a policy of appeasement. We give because we don't want trouble with Guatemala. Look at all the things we have done to try and appease Guatemala. We created the adjacency line, adjacency zone. We refuse to claim all we can in South Seas. We do not know about the SARS 2, not legible. We changed referendum modality, so we never gone together. They gone first. Then they set our date. Then they changed the date. And they changed the date, and we still went along. And then the final blow was we changed the referendum threshold. Remember, we had to 60% of Belizeans voters had to come out. Then we changed it now so that if 3 people come vote and 2 vote yes, we go in. This is all we have done to appease Guatemala. So there is no escape for Guatemala. They don't want to resolve this thing. What they want is they want our territory. Right? We have done everything as a good neighbor, following that policy of appeasement. And then our friends will abandon us. Going back to the concept of sovereignty. All these nations understand sovereignty. When they put to the referendum the other day in the UK, whether they wanted to stay part of the EU or not, the people said, we want to go. What did the government do? Resign and gave the people their will. So if the Belizean people vote no, who on earth could dare tell us that we should have voted yes? The will of the people is sovereign, and we have to respect the will of the people. OAS, CARICOM, Commonwealth, they only echo what we tell them, you know. In the 80s and 90s, CARICOM, every meeting at CARICOM, they condemn Guatemala and then drop a claim. Till we gone and tell them why we think we're going to ICJ. So now what do you think CARICOM they say? We'll go to ICJ. They echo what we pass on to them, man. And this is a prescription. They want this ICJ thing, but only for we. But only for we. And I have said to people, the British and the Americans are prescribing for us a medicine that they themselves would never take. What kind of friend that? You understand me? What kind of friend that? Like someone like that, you know, let your man carry bad, but if she man bad than your man. Anyway, we can get back to this thing. Anyway, the UK and the Argentines have had a problem with the Falklands since 1833. How comes they now carry out the ICJ? In fact, they fought a war over it. Remember the Falklands War, right? They have had a problem since 1833. They not carried out the ICJ. We've had a problem 37 years in Guatemala since our independence, but they hurry to be ICJ. The US and the Canadians have 5 eras of dispute along their border. They don't have the ICJ. Then they talk about it. And I told you about the Americans cutting out the ICJ after they ruled against them. Colombia and Nicaragua, court ruled in favor of Nicaragua, where Colombia maintains its military forces in those territorial waters. And nobody has gone and telling it out. They go back to the drawing board and they talk and they talk and they talk. So you have to be very careful about these friends, these people we call friends. We don't want to send them to the ICJ. And then this is the one that really annoys me. When we have our own government. First, the foreign minister said it. Right? But we're used to the foreign minister putting his foot in his mouth, so nobody up here no mind. That never worked. So they send the chiefs of the forces, Coast Guard, BDF, the police, to come and tell us, guys, we really want to vote yes, because if not, it is war. No, if the chiefs of your security forces are telling you it's war and they are afraid, what do you think the rest of them feel? You understand me? You see the disservice when they do to it? No place for professional military men. And I'm wondering now if they are suggesting to the Guatemalans that the Belizean people vote no. Like almost like they're inviting the Guatemalans to do it, not true? You see how irresponsible this is for leaders to be putting on people through and frightening people because, well, then young people not so afraid of Guatemala, but then older people, lad, when they're granny hear about Guatemala, that's shaking, you know. You know what people afraid bad. In any event, war is not a legitimate option available to Guatemala. Let me tell you that, it is not. And if Belize believes for 1 minute that Guatemala is contemplating war, they should be doing the diplomatic work from now. To say, look, the Guatemalans are saying this, but I gotta tell you, the Guatemalans have said nothing about war. Now we say, incredible. Right? And the use of armed forces, or the threat of the use of armed forces, so it's not just the use, but even for threatening, it's a breach of the UN Charter. So Belize should be pointing to the rest of the United Nations to say, look, get a grip on the people of the Minokane. That is what we should be doing, not say it as if though war is a legitimate option. If you don't go to the ICJ, then it's war. It is not. So since we talk about, I'm going to talk about the BDF deal and how we as a people have really done ourselves a disservice by not investing in our own defense. And I might be a little bit biased here because I served 15 years in the BDF. But it has given me, I think, a very unique perspective on the state of our nation and the lack of zeal on the part of our leaders to defend our country. What we have seen with the BDF since 1995 is what we call mission creep. The BDF Defense Force is for the defense of Belize. What we have done is instead deflected the BDF from the border and turned them inward. So now we have the BDF on almost every street corner now. And that is designed apparently to make us feel safe. Right? And politicians, this started in 1995, Minister of National Security, Dean Barrow at the time, deployed the BDF. It took up until 2014 to get them off the streets. And all this while the BDF were in Belize City, waiting the Guatemalans in the middle. They come in at Chiquibulo. Because the BDF is supposed to be along the border, defending the border, not on Albert Street. So, it makes me wonder if it is not deliberate that we allow crime to get out of control so that you divert the BDF so that the Guatemalans, they can come in. And the people don't want the BDF because people want to feel safe too, so they don't want the BDF left Belize City. You see the kind of trouble we get ourselves into? Today, the police is twice as large as the BDF. So this tells me that our concern as a people is internal security and not external security. The BDF, these days you can't tell the difference between the two. The police dress like BDF, they carry the same firearms as BDF, everything. That is bad in the sense that the police have become ultra aggressive, but it's also bad because the BDF have become sheep. When they go along the border now, they themselves are afraid because we have converted them from professional military men and women to basically police. So unless we are serious about our own defense, this is not going to change. And I'm telling you, nobody will come and fight for you if you're not ready to fight for yourself. I tell you, I got no ballet, I show no ballet, so too. But if you go down Albert Street and see somebody slap up your ballet, everybody don't jump in. I said, Negro, come to your way to show hand. I know the jump in, if I see the war, I might say, well, wow, we have to go down fighting. But me they jump in if you stay and take a look. And this is what happened to it. We are afraid to fight. Who are going to fight to it? If you don't want to defend yourself. So the BDF, between 1978, now remember the BDF was formed in 1978, it's 40 years old. They started with a small contingent and it has grown to about 1,200. But it's only in numbers that it has grown, not effectiveness. When I joined the BDF, we had a British commandant and he was a military man. After the British commandant came the first Belizean commandant, General Alan Usher. And immediately, what do you think happened? Politics. So every year, we used to have what we call battle camp, where the entire BDF deploys and rehearse in preparation for battle with our primary enemy. The first year we did that under the Belizean commandant. The second year, guess what happened? We don't got no money. So we cannot do the whole BDF, so we send it in a parts. The third year, guess what happened? We was not got money. So we're going to really small parts. Up until today, the BDF no longer exercise for battle. It no longer exercise for battle. So your defense force cannot defend this country, not even for 3 days. I am saying this to you because you are voters and you are citizens, so that you are aware. You can't say no. What's the point of having a defense force when you have a neighbor that claims your country and you do nothing to prepare your own defense? No get vexed when somebody cross over into the territory and chance. So, because we have not armed ourselves, and I want to show you a very simple link between the economy and your defense. When you look at the Belizean economy, it's mostly agriculture and services, correct? And so what they've done is to steer us economically into a particular direction. And they say to us, well, it don't make sense for you to build things because you could never build a car cheaper than the Japanese or the Americans. So you open a hotel and you invite Americans to come. But what happens is that if you are able to build cars and you transition to war, you can then take that same industry and begin to produce armored vehicles. You can make firearms. You know, right now, even if you wanted to fight, the men in the room wanted to fight, there are not enough guns in Belize to give you. So even if you want, we've got Guatemala across the border right now, all the man say, well, leave my own fighting. You have to get a slingshot and your machete and so. I know I joke wrong and so, but it's absolutely true. We don't have enough guns to give every able-bodied person in this country. We get guns from the Americans and we get guns from the British. And if they decide that Guatemala is invading and we go and look with these guns, what do you think they're going to do? They might say, well, we tell them to vote yes, so take a look, and I do no gun. Right? This is the real state of our defense, you know. So when you see the generals on TV and they pontificate and all kind of things, this is why I left BDF, to be quite honest with you. I was frustrated. Our leaders are kissing up to the politicians and not doing the things that we're there to do, which is to defend the country and to say, look, this is going to cost us as a country. So we're in some serious problem when it comes to the state of defense. So this is why I say no. I think I'll probably run out of time shortly. I don't question the facts about what happened, all the history of it. I don't question that at all. My problem is the modality. Why are we going by the contentious route and not by the advisory route? The way we're going absolves the British. Like I told you before, this is an Anglo-Guatemalan dispute. Belize is not a party to that treaty. It is the British and the Guatemalans. The British have extricated themselves and they left us now with this problem. And this current modality exposes our territory. Now, nobody would be happier than me if we go and we win and they tell Guatemala sit down. I don't have no problem with that, but what if we lose? That is the problem, right? And so I am not prepared to put up 1 square inch of Belize for anybody to decide to give away. So if the court rules in favor of Guatemala, everything changes for Belize. If they vote in favor of Belize, nothing changes. No. We still have 8,867. Nothing changed. But if they rule against us, we don't even know what the Guatemalans are claiming. You can imagine that you agree to go to court and you don't know when they are claiming. 1 minute and a half, next minute the whole thing, next minute you want Barranco, I don't know why you want Barranco. Right? I'm not sure where they are claiming, so I know I take the chance, it's absolutely crazy. And then the question is craftily worded. There is no legal claim by Guatemala against Belize. That is the question they are asking us now. Do you agree that the legal claim by Guatemala against, which legal claim? You got beef with England, brethren. But that is the question that they're asking us. So I can't support that. Okay, this is the entire question here. Do you agree? Now imagine somebody who is not as educated as we are, trying to comprehend what this is. It's most unfair. Exactly, you have to read it. Do you agree that any legal claim of Guatemala against Belize relating to land and insular territory that are the keys, and to any maritime areas pertaining to those territories should be submitted. And that it determined finally the boundaries. So we are asking the ICJ to tell us where our boundaries are, as if though we don't know. And the only thing I want to make about this is, they often talk, and the ambassador I'm sure will tell us about the legal opinion that we get from all these wonderful lawyers. Well, that same legal opinion that he will tell you about at paragraph 212, this is what our lawyers are telling us. Nothing that has occurred since the exchange of notes serves to transmute possible Guatemalan claims against Britain into possible Guatemalan claims against Belize. In other words, then they tell you that this, the Anglo-Guatemalan dispute, is not got nothing to do with Belize. It's about if we lie, they tell we know. And we still don't agree to that compromise and that question. So I am asking myself, what is it that our leaders are not telling us? Because the PUP and the UDP behave the same way when it comes to this issue. So what is it that they know that they are not telling us? And at times like this, we wish we had a Philip Goes, who may I tell me? You see? All right, next please. See, our borders are established in the Constitution. So why are we asking the ICJ to tell us where the borders are? It's clear in the Constitution, and the Constitution reflects the 1859 treaty. All the markers are in accordance with that treaty. So it's clear to us where the boundaries are. One of the arguments that they make to us is that Guatemala could never have inherited rights to Belize from Spain when Guatemala became independent. But in the same breath, they allow us to inherit Britain's liabilities when we became independent. So they tell Guatemala, when Guatemala became independent, they couldn't have inherited Belize from Spain. But we inherited the British problem when we became independent. You see the two-facedness of that? We can't inherit this, man. This is a British problem, let them solve it. And these are the possible outcomes. We go 2019 and we vote yes. If we vote yes, we will go to the ICJ. We got two outcomes when you go to the ICJ. You can win and you can lose. If Belize wins, that means the treaty is valid and our borders are as defined in the 1859 treaty. Now, if we lose and the treaty is invalid, who is responsible to fix it? We are not parties to that treaty, no. Two parties to that treaty, Britain and Guatemala. So who is responsible to fix it? And does it change the border? And if so, how? So when my good friend, the ambassador, comes in, please remember the question to ask him. Right? Who are responsible to fix it if the treaty is invalid? Will it change the borders? And if you change the borders, how? Now, my view is we should say no to the ICJ and let us recalibrate as a nation. If we say no to the ICJ, then we can say to our leaders, go and ask for an advisory opinion. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the advisory opinion. You can get the same outcome without exposing your territory. Since they are sure that we will win, that means we will win the advisory opinion as well. So let's ask for an advisory opinion. So through the General Assembly, because remember now, excuse me, this is where the problem starts right there. Yeah, so through the General Assembly, as one of the organs of the United Nations, remember, to get an advisory opinion, you can only go through one of the organs. So the General Assembly, as one of the organs, we can go to the General Assembly and ask them to please ask the ICJ for an advisory opinion. And I want to show you quickly how a very small country, Mauritius, less than 800 square miles, I think, is now challenging the British using the same modality. Because remember now,
Well, let me tell you a little bit about what happened with Mauritius. As per I tell you about them British, I hope none of the grandparents and sort of British come and give it to me. Then by the worthless. They know that they want to give independence to Mauritius, right? So what they do? 3 years before they give them independence, they cut off one piece of Mauritius. They separated it. It's called the Chagos Archipelago. It's a chain of islands. They cut off part of it, and then they gave them independence with the rest in 1968. So 1965 they cut off that, and 68 they gave them the rest. And for years these people have been lamenting that they're chancellor. They couldn't get the British to the ICJ. The same British were the people go to the ICJ though. They couldn't get them to the ICJ. So they used the same back door. They went to the General Assembly, asked the General Assembly to ask for a legal opinion if what the British did to them was in accordance with international law. And the General Assembly agreed. The British were furious. They all voted to try convince people to vote against it. But clearly people know whether right and whether wrong. And they voted yes. 94 countries voted yes. 15 voted no. Look at the abstention, 65, including almost all of the EU. You see how politics play? Remember they're withdrawing now from the EU, right? So the EU took the opportunity to give them the finger. Oh, withdraw, we'll take on the lick. The entire EU abstained. But they got the votes that was needed, and they sent the matter to the ICJ for an advisory opinion. And everybody knows that the ICJ will come back and say that what the British did was wrong, and the British have to give back that territory. That is the road that we should be taking as Belizeans. Ask for an advisory opinion, and I'll show some questions that we could ask. Right? So the advisory opinion would allow us, or allow the court, the same court where we went contentiously, would allow that court to determine if the treaty is valid. There is no risk to territory. It is non-binding, so that's the difference, right? When you go contentious, it is binding. The advisory opinion is not binding. But it carries the authority of the court because the court already ruled. So there will be there's no way then you can go with a contentious case because you don't know you will lose, right? So it is not binding. But what Belize could do is go back to the General Assembly and say, okay, the court has said that the treaty is valid. We want a resolution that says, when you pass that resolution in the 1980s saying that Belize should go to independence with its territory intact, this is the territory that you're talking about. The territory in accordance with 1859. And problem solved. Absolutely no risk to our territory. That is going to take a great deal of diplomatic work because we have backed ourselves now into a corner. But it can be done, and the only people that can fix that are we. Because we can no longer rely on those people we send to Washington and London and stuff for us. They have put us in a corner. So I would suggest that we vote no, and that we ask for an advisory opinion. Very simple question. Is the 1859 treaty valid? If they say yes, all this problem gone, you know. All this problem gone. The second question I ask the court, based on the same opinion that our lawyers gave us, is can the Anglo-Guatemalan dispute be transmuted into a Belize-Guatemalan dispute? In other words, if the court says the treaty is invalid, that means that Guatemala don't want beef. So we ask the court, is that beef between Britain and Guatemala, or that beef between Belize and Guatemala? And the court, I can tell you, the court will say, no, that's the only problem. One of the parties to the treaty want to fix that, right? So I only know one more side of it. And then, as a matter of fact, we never have to go ask about the treaty and the border. Right now, Guatemala is violating our territory. We could ask right now about the SARS tool. Because if we go and ask if what the Guatemalans are doing on the SARS tool constitutes annexation of our territory, the court will either say yes or no. If it says yes, guess what? It's clear. So there are options that we can take. And then after we've done all that, we ask, what are the consequences arising from Guatemala's behavior on the SARS tool? Right? Can we claim costs? In fact, we shall carry in a quote for Chicky Bull. Every year, about $18 to $20 million in thief and way out of Chicky Bull is on natural resources. We shall carry a quote and claim all of that money back. But this is what happens when you don't have fierce leaders leading the foreign affairs business. Nobody's looking after the interests of Belize. Anyway, I have to go because then you can't put me on the record. One final note. No, please next slide. All right. This is the map of the United States. All right, as it is today. Next slide, please. This is, you see California, Nevada, and so on here, right? This is what was given to the Americans in 1848. After the Mexican-American War, there was a war between the two countries. They signed a treaty called the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. That treaty gave the United States all that territory that makes up California, Nevada, Wyoming, Colorado, and so on. You can imagine now the Mexicans, they got a new president, right? You can imagine if that new Mexican president said, wait, guys, guess what? Look here. The Americans, they never built a cart road where they said that we may build another treaty. So this treaty invalid or one back with land. What do you think the American people would do? The American people would be in an uproar, I could tell you that. And any politician foolish enough to entertain that, guess what may happen to them? They don't make a joke, they're not true. This is exactly what they're doing to us in Belize. This is exactly what they're doing to us. The Americans will never tolerate the Mexicans to come back and claim territory because there might be some breach or some treaty. That has been established, that is their territory, and they will be prepared to fight and die for it. And so I'll let you know this. I'm going to know. Thank you very much, my friend. This is the final slide. No other than the US President. There is a price which is too great to pay for peace. And that price can be put in one word. One cannot pay the price of self-respect. This is what they're asking us to do as a country, to lose our self-respect and to put the sovereignty of our country before the ICJ. And on that, I say thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you very much, Major Jones. At this time, we will have some questions and concerns. You can share your questions and concerns. Mr. Cobb will go around with the microphone. We ask that you, because we are kind of pressed for time, we ask that you clarify your questions so that we can get responses from the Major. So at this time, any questions, any comments?
Good morning. Two questions and a comment. The first question, you talk about the game of interest. Countries have interest. And I would like you to explain a little bit more for me. Who would have interest in Belize if we actually had to face up with Guatemala? That's the first question. The second question, you talk about the claim being a British claim, but before that you talk about sovereignty and independence. Who should be looking after the affairs of this country, even regarding this claim to Belize? And the comment, I am sure that Mr. Enrique, he never thought about getting the Peace Award, but I am thinking that if he do get it, we could use the money at someone he needs. Thank you.
I was just quoting myself when I said that, to be honest with you. I hold our Prime Minister in the highest regard. This is a difficult job for people, I want you to understand. It's extremely difficult, and I am sure that they are under a lot of pressure when they go to Washington and London, precisely because of the interest. The interest of the British here is to get this Guatemala problem off their backs. When you look at nation states, for example, these things are a blemish to their record. That here is the mighty British unable to contend with Guatemala. Guatemala compared to Britain is nobody. But the Guatemalans were giving the British hell. That tarnishes their reputation on the international scene. You can imagine when the Americans and the British get together at high level, they want to know, why are we going on here Morales doing this or here Morales doing that? That's how it works, you know. So it is in their interest to erase this problem, to get it over and done with. The other question, you're quite right, we are sovereign and independent. The challenges that we have in Guatemala is never going to go away now. When you have a neighbor, unless you move from one place and go to the next, we don't have that option. So we will always have to live with Guatemala. Border challenges are an ongoing issue. The nature, the complexion, the tenor of that challenge or those challenges depend on time. So for example, right now we have an eastward drift. The Guatemalans are coming over into Belize. They say they are poor, they look across, they see all these wonderful mahogany, they see all these carry runs, so they hear gold, so they come. If the economy improves in Guatemala and things get bad in Belize, what do you think will happen? People will go west. So the nature and the complexion of the border challenges will vary with time, with the economy, with circumstances. But it is always and will always be our duty to defend this 8,867. And everything you do must be in our interest first. Everybody else should come second.
I think I could speak loud enough. I heard you said that the ICJ is an exercise in futility. Nothing changed. You prefer the advisory group.
Yes, as I was saying, you said that the ICJ route is one of exercise in futility and would prefer the advisory one. In the event that we get what we decide in the advisory one, who will enforce? Since the Security Council will have to enforce ICJ, which, correct me if I'm wrong, in your opinion, will not be, who would enforce the advisory one if it goes our way?
Okay. The contentious route, that decision goes to the Security Council for enforcement if any of the parties do not live up to their obligations. From the advisory route, it goes to the General Assembly for the passage of a resolution. Even then, it has to go back to the Security Council if, for example, Guatemala still continues with its nonsense. The difference here is that it would have been clear to the entire world that when they said we went to independence with our territory intact, it meant 8,867. It would be the same outcome as if we had gone to the contentious route and won. Because that is what they're telling us. They're saying, if we go right now the way we're going and we win, it would tell Guatemala, sit down because you retire food. If you go the advisory way, it would be the same outcome. The only difference is that you're not submitting and subjecting any part of your territory to be granted to Guatemala. Because the way we're going right now, they actually draw our borders because we've asked them to do that, if they think it is necessary. That's the only difference. So this all really boils down to diplomacy. When you look at what we have done between 1975 to 1980, it was stellar diplomatic work. And like I said, when we became independent, we somehow thought we had won the World Cup or something, we stopped work. And the Guatemalans slowly crept and crept. Now they got in our corner, where we have to, now we are told we have to resolve this issue. Right? But there is no difference, we have to go back to the Security Council ultimately.
So in your opinion, the only case that we could see is losing a part of Belize because the status quo will remain for eternity.
Well, I am saying that I am not prepared to take a risk or to do anything that exposes the territory of Belize. Particularly since there are other options that can give us the scapegoat. That is what I'm saying. The way we are going right now exposes the territory of Belize. Even though they say we are winning, we might very well, like I said, if we go and we win, nobody will be more happy than me. But what if we lose? And if you understand risk analysis, risk is equal to probability times consequence. The consequence is half of Belize. They're saying the probability is low. where a low probability times a high consequence give you, at the very least, a medium risk. I am not prepared to take that.
Do we have any more comments or questions? With that, I would like to express thanks to Major Jones for giving us a critical perspective on the issue. Let's give him a round of applause. As we prepare for the evidence-based perspective, I invite you for a snack. At the back, we have coffee, orange juice, banana bread, something else. So I invite you all to step to the back, approximately 10 minutes. Great. 5 minutes for us to have a snack. But they're already here. The presenters are already here.